introduction to editing Wikipedia. I hope everybody had a good holiday weekend, if it was a holiday where you were. So today we are going to look at the concept of notability, which on the outset, it's not probably a word that unless you're a Wikipedian, you're used to using an awful lot. The idea of somebody being notable or having notability, or a subject for that matter. But the idea of notability is absolutely critical for what is covered on any language Wikipedia. So, as with all of these things, there is a page that goes blow by blow as to what notability is and how it is outlined. And as you can see, we have our nutshell again. And the idea is that Wikipedia covers notable topics. And again, we are back to this idea of what fundamentally does an encyclopedia do. And an encyclopedia covers notable or covered areas of knowledge, so things for which there is a large corpus of information already available on it, and for which the encyclopedia just condenses that knowledge into an easily digestible article, and then for which you can go off and find out more information about it from those other secondary sources. But to break it down a little bit, and I find it's quite useful to look at the general notability guide, which is quite often, if you start looking at, I suppose, discussions and why content might be, flagged as being not notable, you will quite often see this nomenclature here, which is WP::GNG, which is a general notability guide, which is kind of like a quick acid test as to whether or not something can be regarded as notable. And it breaks down into five little signposts for us, basically. First, we have the idea of significant coverage. And it's the idea that something, the topic, the person, the area of knowledge, has been both directly and in detail covered by secondary sources, and that this is not original research. So again, we're going back to the idea of we're not looking at primary sources, we're not looking at original research. What's quite specific to this is that it is not a trivial mention. So it's not just a mention in passing about someone or something, that the actual source you're deriving your information from, that what you're writing about is the topic, the main topic or one of the main topics of the source that you're drawing on. So as an idea here, a book length history on a topic, or that a newspaper article is specifically dedicated to the topic at hand. The idea that these sources are reliable. So again, we're going back to the kind of sources that we want to be using on Wikipedia. So these are all those good sources that you will come across in academia. You'll have your books, your newspapers of note or of record. So the idea of like the Irish Times, the New York Times, the Times of India, that kind of thing. So they are newspapers in good standing, but also other news outlets, so state broadcasters, that kind of thing. Also journal articles and other kind of significant coverage like that, and that the coverage is reliable. It's coming from good quality sources, basically. And reliable also implies within it that it is verifiable, so that somebody else can follow in your footsteps and ensure that the information that you are reporting back is accurate. Source is that they are secondary and that you have multiple. So you're not relying on one source entirely for your Wikipedia article. What's quite important in this as well, when you're looking at assessing whether or not something is, or somebody, or some topic is notable enough to be on Wikipedia, is that you're not just having the same academic or the same journalist or the same person writing about the topic. If it's only ever one academic that's written about something, nobody else has ever mentioned it within any other body of work, that is a little bit of a red flag that it hasn't quite surpassed. So you might have multiple sources, but they're all coming from the same writer, basically. And that means that there's going to be issues around whether it's notable, but also whether there are biases within that. Is this person writing a particular history, a particular narrative around the subject, or do they just think that it's really important and nobody else has really agreed with them yet, or may never agree with them. Independent of the subject is quite an interesting one. So say we're talking about a new area of research, a new area of science, but the only people writing about it are, say, the academic institution related to the researcher. So it's just that university, it's just Oxford releasing press releases about it yet, but nobody else is writing about it. If the research is coming out of a particular institution, you want people other than that institution writing about it, basically. So that's your independence from the subject. There is a remove, so other people are kind of giving it a test as to whether or not it is notable. And once you have reached, I suppose, these four markers, it is presumed that the topic that you're writing about is notable enough, but it is not a given. As with everything on Wikipedia, there's always scope for discussion. Somebody may challenge the notability of a topic, despite the fact that you may feel yourself, or the writer may, the editor might feel that they've reached these four markers here. It may still be, come up for discussion. And generally, this is ideas around the idea of what Wikipedia is not, so that it's not a textbook, it's not a soapbox. It doesn't write about the news, is one that comes up an awful lot. That it doesn't report things that happen blow by blow, but something has to be kind of demonstrated to be important outside of its temporality, outside of when it happened, basically. And the main rule that Wikipedia is not an indiscriminate collection of knowledge, that it has the idea of notability gives Wikipedia some kind of curatorial structure. Now, not everybody agrees with how this is implemented, and that's why we start to get kind of discussions around individual articles as to whether or not something is notable or not. And also, by looking at this notability guide, you're starting to see why certain areas of knowledge might be quite poorly represented. So, significantly women's history, but also other minority histories don't tend to get that amount of written corpus around them, so they're all automatically at a disadvantage to the traditional types of people, places, and things that were written about, and events, and also who was writing about them, from what perspective we were getting them from. Also, people have started to unpick what they refer to as kind of like a vicious circle, or a circle of notability, in that it started to become a bit of an acid test as to whether or not a person, place, or thing is notable based on whether or not it has a Wikipedia article. And unless it has a Wikipedia article, perhaps it doesn't get written about. So, or get spoken about, or included in documentaries or radio shows or whatever it is, because its discoverability is hampered by the fact that it's not on Wikipedia as it stands. So some people have said that there's a bit of kind of a catch-22, or a bit of a chicken and egg going on there, to use laboured metaphors. And these issues are, and I suppose if there was, with any system that's come up with to gauge whether or not something is important enough for Wikipedia, there's always going to be an issue. And this is just the best format that we have at the moment. And we kind of work within it. Every day when articles are created, they are flagged as kind of having issues. They get the different maintenance tags that we referred to, like the one for original research. So the one that I looked at today, looking at topics that have been marked as perhaps not meeting the guidelines for notability. And of course, predictably, I've picked a biography, but of a living person, and a living woman, a living Irish woman. I'd never heard of her. I went trawling through lists. You can find lists of articles that have been tagged as having notability issues. Those lists are sorted by date, which is not wonderfully helpful. There might be better ways of finding the content that I just wasn't able to find today. But it turns out, actually, Mary Aiken, when I presumed when she had this tag that I was going to really struggle to find sources about her, or that perhaps that she was going to be quite a minority or a niche academic. Very much not the case. If you do a Google search for her yourself, you will discover this quite quickly. But the article as it stands really doesn't speak to the level of, I suppose, media coverage and influence that this woman has had in recent years, both from a pop cultural perspective, but also from an academic and governmental perspective. And we'll unpick that a little bit. But what we can see here at the moment, so we have our little lead section, says that she's a cyber psychologist. That's absolutely fine. We have a little bit about her education. Now, we don't have a citation at the moment. I have a feeling that this information might be coming directly from her website or LinkedIn or something like that. We have a little bit about her career, about some of the work that she does and the agencies that she advises. Also that she has a book. Now, we don't have a citation at the moment. Now, the way that this is worded, I have a strong suspicion that this is coming from her website, so we will maybe work on that a little bit. and then that she was inducted into the Info Security Europe Hall of Fame. The main issue that has been flagged with this is that we're not getting a full blow by blow of why she might be notable enough to have her own article on Wikipedia, but also that the sources that we're using here are perhaps not fantastic. Now, I would say that the first one probably isn't so bad. Silicon Republic in Ireland is quite a well-respected tech and I suppose security, kind of broadly technology news in Ireland, but also, covers science and other innovations in STEM. The Wilson Centre is kind of promoting itself there, so again, we don't have that independence. So we're saying that, she's a Wilson Scholar. It's the Wilson Centre saying that she's a fellow, sorry. And then we have the Hall of Fame Info Security Europe. Ideally, we would like to see perhaps a news outlet or something reporting that rather than directly from Info Security, because it is a promotional tool within this. So we're going to do a little bit of editing to see if we can make a bit of a difference to this article. I don't know if we'll get it to the point where I'll be happy removing the maintenance tag. I waver sometimes in how demonstrative I am in removing maintenance tags. Sometimes I'll go in all guns blazing, I'll make changes and go, definitely, I'm quite happy that this maintenance tag can now be removed, especially if it's a particularly old tag. And so we can see this one. This article has only been created, it was created in February and was immediately tagged as such, as having these issues. If the tag was, if this article was far older and had quite a number of edits and had a tag from, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I felt that the article had improved or some of the issues that have been outlined had been mitigated, I'd feel a little bit more confident removing it. In this case, what I might do is you leave it up to somebody else to take I suppose, hopefully a more unbiased look and see whether or not the issues identified with the article are still extant. So the first thing about Mary is that we have this element here, which is her book, and the fact that it received these two, I suppose, award. They're not quite awards. I suppose they're nominations or selections as being of note in some way. So here we actually don't see. I found, so it says book received the award, the book of the year in the thought category. Doesn't say by whom. I thought by the writing of this sentence that it meant that both of these were by the Nature Journal, but it turns out that they're not. So it's by the Times, which I presume it means the Times of London, but it's actually not particularly clear. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So we have our books in brief, and this is the article from Nature which says that the cyber effect, this is back in 2016, was selected as one of the science picks. One of the 5, which, it's a weekly pick. Whether or not that's anything to get wildly excited about is probably up for debate. But we're going to add our citation. So we have our URL. And hopefully Nature have done the work on their website. They have some issues. Okay. So we're going to say edit. So check values. So we don't have a date. So we know it was 24th of August 2016. Don't think it likes the date format. Books in brief. We're not saying when we looked at the. So I want to add my new information, and I want to add URL access date is what I want to add, and that is today's date, so 16. Yep. Apply the changes there. Now it's happy, because it's a URL, it didn't automatically populate that for me because it was taking it as, I think, a journal. But now we have that in. Now I have the second. So see if Nature Journal is a link. It is. We actually just probably call it Nature. Now, the Times. Yes, you see, the Times refers to an awful lot of things, so it's not particularly clear which newspaper we're being asked, so we can close that one now. So it also says here, so here we have It was reviewed by the Times. Again, we're not seeing which Times, but we're getting this thought category, which actually seems to be capitalized. I'm going to add quotes to it, a bit like science pick. But so this is a website. It's a cyber psychology website. It's not an amazing, it's not a terribly independent source based on the fact that she is a cyber psychologist, but more than likely going to cover this topic more rigorously than, I suppose, mainstream outlets. So we're going to say site. I did try and see whether I could find out which Times they're referring to, but I didn't have any luck. My Google foo did not help me with that. I'm going to add that there. So now we've removed the need for the citation needed. Now, I think the most important thing that's missing from here, as regards notability, is her effect on popular culture. Now, I'm kind of going a little bit for the low-hanging fruit here, because she has, as we said, she's advised an awful lot of kind of government agencies. She's spoken to the Irish Oireachtas Committee, which is a governmental committee on, I think, justice, which we can add a little bit to. But this is the really, I suppose, she's gotten a bit of coverage on this. It's spoken about an awful lot. The fact that she's had an effect on popular culture in this way, I think, is quite important. So we're going to say, in popular culture, Aiken was the inspiration. Oh, I don't have for the lead. Can't spell today, guys. Lead character in a CSI series, CSI Cyber, and I will show you some of the citations now. So I'm just going to add this in so I can. I'm going to make this a heading. So we don't want a paragraph, we want a heading. Now, and I'm going to make this a link. Now, we go to the citation. So this is the Irish Examiner, which is a relatively reputable newspaper in Ireland, and you can see Meet the Irish Woman Who Inspired the New CSI Show. So this is from 2015. Now, it wasn't a terribly long-lived CSI show, but it has its own Wikipedia article. It's quite long. Had a number of quite notable actors and actresses in it, including Patricia Arquette, whose character is supposed to be based on Mary Aiken. So we can say Patricia Arquette's character in. We'll get that in. Let's say played by Patricia Arquette. We add a few comments in there. And we'll add our citation. Because let's face it, guys, I'm probably not going to manage to get too much into this article in the next 10 minutes. Now, great. So we've added that in. I do have other citations that back that up. Another thing that I wanted to add is we haven't explored the idea of external links. And external links have to be used judiciously, so you use them kind of carefully. And external links are ways of perhaps pointing to other sites and sources of information. A little bit different from further reading. External links might point to, I don't know, somebody's collected papers within an institution that you're not going to cite that directly, but you want to, an interested reader might want to go and look at them. Another thing is kind of live in this area, which is, I suppose, how people or topics exist on other similarly created knowledge formats, I suppose. One of which would be IMDb. There's also Find a Grave, and we're not going to use that as a source because, again, these things are crowd curated, so they're not deemed notable, or they're not deemed reliable by Wikipedia as a source. But we can definitely, it's another place for information. You know, somebody might want to look at Mary Aiken as she exists on IMDb as opposed to reading the Wikipedia article, or as well as reading it. So here there is a template for pointing to IMDb entries. So rather than me saying entry on IMDb, typing that in and then creating a link, an external link, there's a template which does it in a much neater way. So IMDb. And so it's the number that we want. Try it out. So on IMDb, basically, entries have unique numbers. Oh, no, that's not what I want. So person. This is what I have not messed around with this particular template. I know how to do it in Source. I don't know how to do it in this. So I fall down a little bit. Do you know what? I'm going to very quickly look at an example that I know for a fact is an IMDb. So I created this article a while ago. Gladys Roy. And I know I added the IMDb. This is what I've discovered as a Wikipedia editor. I learn how to do something, and if I don't do it every single day or every single time I create an article, I immediately forget how to use a particular template. So I'm going to look at the edit source and see what it's called. Yes, it's IMDb name. Okay, I don't think I need the numbers. So let's say template name ID. I think it's the ID I wanted out. There we go. There we go. Okay. So let's take a look at that again. So it's the ID number that I needed to add as the. We'll do that again, just so we'll both learn very specifically how to do that. IMDb. It's the name, and it's the ID number that I'm adding. And you can see it's basically pulling, so it knows from the IMDb database that this specific number is Mary Aiken, and here she is. Excellent. We've all learned something today. So I'm going to save that. And say added citations. Section on popular culture and IMDb. Publish those changes. Another thing about Notability, and I think I might have mentioned this before when it comes to linking and why linking is so important. Those interwiki links, these blue links, are so important on Wikipedia, is because if something, now this hasn't been tagged as an orphan. An orphan is an article to which no other article links to. So no other article has mentioned the topic that we're dealing with. So it's orphaned. It's an orphan with wiki links. It has none. And not having any wiki links, having no other article referring to the topic at hand or the person or whatever it is a bit of a red flag again that perhaps the topic is not notable enough for inclusion on Wikipedia. Nothing else is talking about something. Now, you may find when you're writing about something, I find with mothers, daughters, sisters, they're just not wives. They're just not mentioned perhaps in their husband's or their male relatives' article until I've created it, and then I can add them in. That's not much of a crowbar. You're not crowbarring the information into it. It's quite relevant to talk about somebody's wife within their article. But if something doesn't fit naturally within another article, it doesn't bode well. And to see what other pages link to a specific page, the tools down on the left-hand side here, we can say what links here. So what other pages are linking here? So you can see she's got a few links. So cyber psychology, the article on cyber psychology mentions her. The list of the episodes of CSI's Cyber, the 2 seasons. And the other ones are, I suppose, kind of not live article pages. So they're the user that created it. The Women in Red, it was flagged as an article that was created, that kind of thing. But what I noticed is On the main article about CSI Cyber, she hasn't been linked to yet. So if we scroll all the way down to concept and development, Mary Aiken is mentioned here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in, because another link is always a good, another natural link like that, where there is a mention already of the person, the topic, the subject, and hasn't been linked to yet. It's kind of quite a natural one. So I'm going to edit this section. Thinking about it. Here we go. No, she's in. There we go. And this is definitely a minor edit. I'm just going to say minor edit. Link for here. Yeah. Publish changes. And there we go. Now, as mentioned, that's a very small tweak that I've made. Relatively small tweak that I've made to her article, and we could probably compress, I would say, because all of the things that she's doing, like the popular culture, the fact that she's an author, and her achievements, that's all probably part of her career. So I'm going to make these subheadings, because I was actually discussing this with a fellow editor quite recently, over Twitter conversation, that one of the maintenance tags that you can get is that this article needs sections. You know, it's a big long block of text that doesn't have any, you know, way markers as regards sections. But then you'll come across an article like this where there's just too many sections, and each section only, you know, has a line. And because this is a stub, it's obviously going to suffer from that a little bit. But there doesn't seem to be, a bit like with Notability itself, people have different conceptions of perhaps how sections should and shouldn't be used, and they'll have kind of their personal preferences. Quite often, if I have quite a short article, a biographical one in particular, I might just have, you know, your lead section, then I might just say life and have all the info. That might be 2 or 3 paragraphs, and somebody might come along and tag that as needing sections, and I would feel that there's probably not enough content there for it to be broken up too much. But you will always get slightly different interpretations to a certain extent. And if you felt that, you know, felt quite strongly about it, the best thing is to start a conversation about it. So I'm just going to say publish changes here and say change to subheadings. If I had very strong feelings about how this article should be, you know, overhauled or changed radically, and you felt that perhaps the original editor or some of the people who've made demonstrative edits to it, you know, since might be a little bit taken aback or might feel that your changes are kind of dramatic. And the easiest thing to do is every article has a talk page. And talk page is where you can start this conversation. Equally, if this article was nominated for deletion, that, you know, somebody felt that really this woman is not notable, or this person's topic is not notable enough at all, they might start a discussion in the talk page and nominate it for deletion, and that would generate a discussion page where people can basically decide whether or not they want to, they feel it should be kept or not. And we can look at the process of AFD, articles for deletion, in the future if that's something that people find interesting. But say if I felt I wanted to make quite dramatic changes to how an article looks and feels, I might start a new section here. So this is the talk page, so it's the discussion page, and I might just say something like, you know, overhaul of article, and then I would type in here. Now this is in source editing, there isn't visual editor on talk pages, but I would start a conversation here saying, these are the changes I want to make, these are the sources I'm going to use. And you could even link to maybe a similar article and say, this is the article I'm using for inspiration. You know, I think it should look and feel a little bit more like this, like a good version of a particular biography or topic summation, that kind of thing. So I think that's all for today. I hope that the concept of notability is a little bit more tangible for you all now. There's obviously, there is the page there where you can read into it a little bit more in depth, and there is kind of more granular detail in what of all the concepts that we've talked about a little bit today. So, you know, always good source material to read up on. There is ways of finding similar topics. You know, if you see this maintenance tag, this is definitely an invitation for people to edit and to improve articles. So really do feel like it is an invitation to edit Wikipedia rather than, I suppose, a red flag that, you know, seems insurpassable. You know, definitely see it as a prompt, a writing prompt, a research prompt, rather than something to put you off. These maintenance tags are not supposed to live there forever. They are supposed to be remedied in one way or another. So hopefully you'll feel a little bit more empowered to do that. Thanks so much for joining me today. I will be back tomorrow. Haven't decided what I'm going to cover yet. Hopefully inspiration will strike. If you have any suggestions, tweet at me at Wikimedia IE or Restless Curator. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.